week on One Day Leader, the contestants put themselves in the shoes of South Africa's forgotten phenomenal women. Good evening, Sanbonani, and a warm welcome to yet another episode of One Day Leader. This is One Day Leader Season 8. Now, we're only 3 episodes into the solution-driven season of One Day Leader, and it's already been quite a journey. Trust me when I say the bar has been set, and it's been set quite high. Today, we shine the spotlight on South Africa's forgotten women. This year, South Africa commemorates and celebrates 26 years of democratic freedom. There is no denying the fact that there have been great developments over the years to right the wrongs of the past. Now, when you look at some key decision-making structures in politics, the private sector, and other key sectors of society, even with all these developments, these people continue to suffer oppression on the basis of their race, gender and class. Ngikhuluma about poor black women who haven't fully reaped the rewards of iNkululeko esikhuluma ngayo. Today we take a step to understanding the plight of these poor black women who are forced to work long hours on end only to barely make the minimum wage and are still expected to feed their families. Now, this is to answer one question. How do we uproot phenomenal black women such as domestic workers from the bottom of the food chain? Far from an easy task, but I know that our 6 leaders never shy away from a challenge, and they are more than ready to tackle today's topic. Let me reintroduce you to our leaders, and we begin with you, Leader 1. Good evening. Your vision statement, please.
Who taught us to look outside ourselves, our communities, and our unique values for solutions? For the longest time, black people and black women specifically have been taught that solutions about their problems exist outside them, that they are inherently inferior and without the capacity to meaningfully contribute to discussion. However, I am a believer as well as an advocate for our inherent capacity to contribute to discussions. I am an inherent advocate for black intellect. Therefore, solutions to our problems are solutions that we can think of and innovate. Bagiti, people-centered solutions for our problems. Nyabo.
Thank you very much. Leader 2, welcome. It's your turn.
I am an African seed that was taught French Revolution. I was not taught about the Battle of Yindwe. I was taught that my heroes, they were criminals for fighting for liberation. Biko, I have lost my identity. Chrisan, I have lost my patriotism towards an African nation building. However, today I'm reminded that this land was not given unto me by my forefathers, but this land was given unto me by my children, so that one day I may give it to them as a better nation with an African identity. South Africa, Africans, join me in the cause of building an African identity in the African land. Thank
you very much. Hello, Leader 3, it's your turn.
I am on a mission to establish context that is beyond the grave, to assure the heroes of our past that their struggle was not in vain, but most importantly, to remind you and I that our voices were not drowned by the echoes of our forefathers from the bullets of the colonialists. Africa is not poor. Africa is being robbed by our apathy, silence, and neutrality. For socio-economic transformation and emancipation, South Africa needs a new type of citizen, a catalyst for change, a surgeon for humanity, and an advocate for Africanism. If not you and I, then who? And if not now, then when?
Thank you very much, Leader 3. Good evening to you, Leader 4. Your vision statement, please.
The Soweto uprising of 1976 displayed young black people who did not allow adversity to dampen their spirits. Born and bred in Soweto, I am here to remind young people in economic peripheries that we can be leaders on national podiums. We are worthy of time and space. I lead a transformative education movement which seeks to restore the confidence of those who are in economic peripheries to fuel their prosperity. #Zizojigizinto.
And just like that, we say hello to you, Leader 5. Your vision statement, please.
the creation of a peaceful and prosperous society that includes all people of all races, regardless of gender and transcending sexual orientation, is the development of professionals with a sociological understanding for societies within which they operate. Restoring prosperity and promoting the cause of peace for all. South Africa, I am the one we've been waiting for.
Thank you very much, Leader 5 and Leader 6. Welcome. Your vision statement, please.
My voice, my mind, my life. 3 things I will use to fight for those whose suffering is silenced. Youth hindered by a lackluster education system. Women under siege by the patriarchy, from the gender pay gap to gender-based violence. Queer bodies systemically excluded from all sectors of society. The 99% who've been repeatedly failed by the state. And Black Africans who continue to live under the dictatorship that is the legacy of apartheid. South Africa, I give you my voice, my mind, and my life.
Thank you very much, leaders. Mzansi, these are the 6 young people who will be championing #Project SA. Now, remember, you at home can be a part of this conversation, and you can hold each and every one of these leaders accountable for what they say and promise to do on our social media pages. We are on Twitter and Instagram. Search for @OneDayLeader. And of course, we are on Facebook. Search for One Day Leader Season 8. Last week, you had an opportunity to vote for your favorite leader. With that, let's take a look at who you chose to lead the pack.
This week's viewer vote sees Leader 2, Tobani, leading with 2,103 votes, and Leader 6, Bell, trailing behind with 342 votes. This means that Leader 2, Tobani, gets 1 point. Congratulations.
Mzansi, don't forget to load that airtime and keep voting for your favorite, as your vote could determine who is crowned this season's One Day Leader. Now, this season's theme is #Project SA, where we try to solve South Africa's social ills. No episode of One Day Leader is complete without our 2 resident judges. With that, let's welcome them. They are Gugulethu Mhlungu, who has over a decade experience in media as a talk radio anchor, writer. Currently, she serves as a deputy editor for a leading South African magazine and was the winner of the 2015 Columnist of the Year at the Legends Media Awards. And Ndumiso Hadebe, who's an economist, an entrepreneur, a faculty member of a leading South Africa business school, the recipient of the Gauteng Premier's Excellence in Business Award, and the winner of One Day Leader Season 2. Quite accomplished, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome our resident judges. And joining our 2 amazing judges is our equally great guest. She is our guest judge for today. Allow me to introduce to you Dr. Tlale Mufugeng, Dr. T, as she's popularly known, is a commissioner at the Commission for Gender Equality, a popular social commentator and advocate for various issues that affect women. Le Imbogotangembela. Welcome to One Day Leader. Now, Dr. T, you work a lot with women who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. You work a lot with women who really are going through some of the worst things that anyone can face. Is South Africa doing enough to assist those women, to uplift women who are still living in poverty, who are still faced with issues of not getting enough opportunities in order for them to make their family situations better?
I think there's no doubt that South Africa's constitution offers these protections, which are actually human rights protections. And it does offer these protections to all citizens who live in South Africa. However, on a daily basis, literally speaking, not a lot of the women who are black and poor in the margins of society are able to actually realize the protections of their rights. And through the work of the Commission, our mandate is to protect and promote, and more importantly, develop and advance gender equality. And we cannot do it if we are leaving big chunks of women behind. We have to make sure that as we move forward in a country, whether it's policy related, whether it's related to new innovations related to technology, to land farming, marine biology, we have to make sure that women are leading, and women must be trusted with that process of ensuring that their needs are placed first.
Thank you very much, Dr. T. Googs, let me come to you.
A couple of years ago, when we crafted the National Development Plan, there was a woman called Thandi that was used to illustrate the plight of the demographic majority of South Africans. She was a young black woman born into poverty, and I thought it was quite interesting that we finally put a face to the person at the coalface of all of our challenges, be they poverty, inequality, issue of landlessness, etc., are poor black women. The recently released stats by Sabc say black African women have the highest rate of unemployment. So I'm hoping tonight we are able to then have that conversation. It's always been a gendered conversation. All of our conversations about race, about class, about land have always been gendered, but somehow we've left it out, and I hope tonight our leaders are able to do that, to have this conversation we should have been having anyway.
Thank you very much, Googs. And lastly, I'll come to you, Ndumiso. I know you are someone that is really concerned with the advancement of women's rights in this country. What advice would you give to the government of the day?
I think from a government perspective, a lot of the time the response that can be solicited from government can be either from a policy level or the allocation of fiscal resources and so on and so forth. But the input that I would give to the state right now is to focus policy making and the allocation of resources around the upward social mobility of women. I think by doing that and focusing policy and resources on that, you ultimately will be addressing the general developmental goals that the state of the day would have set out for themselves. I think it presents a massive opportunity to be able to improve the social mobility of what would be the most marginalized people in South African society today.
All right, thank you very, very much, judges. Now today we find out more about the plight of phenomenal black women. Mzansi, you can always have your say on our social media platforms. But Manje, we'll take a quick break. Do stay with us. One day leader. Before the break, we spoke about how with all the developments that have taken place in our country, poor black women seem to still have been left behind. Mzansi, the stats tell us that there are almost 1 million domestic workers in the country, many of which work under unfavorable conditions for long hours, only to make 3,500 Rand or less. Now, these are just some of the conditions that these oppressed women have to endure. As women, we've decided to hashtag take up space. Thank you very much, Miss Universe. Contestants were tasked with spending a day in the lives of South Africa's forgotten women. Let's take a look at how it all went.
We're going to meet up with Siamthanda. She is a domestic worker and she lives at Cosmo City. So this is a task that is between myself and my group members.
We had our own expectations. As when you have a task, you leave your room expecting something. And each time you get to be humbled by what you come across.
Hello. The first thing I hate to point out, but I picked on were her living conditions. They were quite clear. So she has a very small space and she doesn't live alone. So she has children and her life can't be easy.
So I'm going to 2, first born I'm 14, and then omncane una 6 amantombazana.
So abantwana bakho labo osala nabo boyi-2 abasebenzi boyi-2.
Abasebenzi omunye usesikoleni.
I think it was a very harsh reminder that this is in fact the reality for a lot of women in this country. And especially for women like Mama Angelina, who are the sole breadwinner for their families and the kind of pressure that they're put under to provide.
As a domestic worker.
So mawusaqala khona like navumelana ngani bene contract.
Bekhona isivumelwano sokuthi uzohamba ngibuye.
Okay.
But then sometimes usukungazi indaba zama contract.
This talks to the legislature, you know, whether or not there is legislature to protect such women. So unesikhathi singakanani uthengisa la?
Ngine 6 years ngidayisa mina.
As a nation, we haven't done much. Some of us have went so far ahead that we haven't looked back to realize that the gap between us and the people that are behind us is so big.
Isikhathi ngiqala ukusebenza lapha izinto zokudayisa. Angiphumelele because ngisala ngibaleka ngisaba amapholisa.
seeing Mama Angelina and how she's unable to provide for her family to a greater extent than she currently is because of bureaucracy and red tape, and how the state is just so... They just systematically exclude women who have no other means of uplifting their family.
Bengaphathekanga kahle bengihlukumezeka like yabona ukuthi umuntu akwenzisa izinye izinto ongeke uzuzi-understand ukuthi asizo zinto esasivumelanayo lezi. Ukuthi ngi-explainele ukuthi boss umntana uyagula so bengisekhemesi ukuthi ngiyamthengela something. Yasuka ke lapho. Wathukana ke lapho ngenhlambi ezinkulu. Wangiphusha okwesi-3 bese kusiza iphansi ngayibhlokha ngesandla lesi. And then okwesi-4 wangiphusha. Mangipusha mawusuke ekitchen usiye pantry kunestepisi. So ngayashayeka ngeqolo. And then angayazi ukuthi kwenzakalani ngathi mangivuka laphana ngangafili umzimba wami wonke lo.
The way domestic workers are treated continues and is perpetuated because their employers show that same behavior to their children.
Abona kukho konke nje sengubonile lifeini. Indaba leyo the way nje engaphatheka ngakhona ngalesa nesikhathi yabona ngishaywa phambili komntana nami omncane naye egula. Yangenza ngaba nolaka lelana olukhulu kakhulu. La that fact ukuthi ngiwani ngumama ngiwani yabona I'm trying ukuthi
She is the contemporary face of many other women in South Africa or Africa, because this is like structural, and funny enough, it's like it's passed on from women, from generation to generation through women, and it seems like there's nothing that changes, because even during the apartheid era we had this. 26 years into democracy we still have this.
Samugel Babugeli Kodalagu, One Day Leader. This is season 8. Igama nginguPearl Shongwe. Now, they say that women are not only the backbone of the home, but they're also the bedrock of our nation. Yet women, and in particular black women, seem to be at the back foot of our nation's development. Now, why is that? And what can we do to change that? These are just some of the issues that our contestants will be tackling tonight. And before we get into that, let's remind you and them the rules of engagement. You have 60 seconds to propose, 90 seconds to debate, and 30 seconds to conclude. Our first debate for tonight is between Leader 2 and Leader 6. You guys are familiar with the rules of engagement, so Leader 2, your 60 seconds start now.
Judges Panel South Africa, I would like to first acknowledge the fact that women, specifically black women, are at the back foot of our economy and are at the bottom of the food chain due to systematic prejudice that was there before our existence. Secondly, the normalization of patriarchy and racial systems that are there in society that has enhanced us into normalizing the abnormal situation of seeing women as a subhuman or being belittled and to compare to other humans. So what do I bring about to you today? One, I would like to advance for social change. That's the first thing I would like to advance for. Social change. Do you know that back in the days in 2000, when you had HIV and AIDS, people saw you with a killer disease, so much that they did not want to sit or be placed with you in society. But because there was Soul City and there was adverts that told us that HIV and AIDS is not actually a deficit that is killer in society, we then began to understand that it's something that you can live with it. Let's then begin to normalize and have media normalizing how women are important in society. Because we can't have a president of the AU who is capable as a leader of South Africa.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. You have 90 seconds to engage.
Leader, would you mind giving us some tangible examples as to how you plan to actually change mindsets of young boys and young men?
Thank you, ma'am. I was just about to go there. So this is what I was telling you. We can't have a president of the AU who is capable leading the whole African continent with credentials. When she's running for president in South Africa, she's being called the ex-wife of the president, Jacob Zuma, running for president. Those are such prejudice that we should move in society, because they never said the ex-wife of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in any instance. Secondly, in advancing social change, with us boys, when we sit and have our negotiations, there is no home that told me how to share like hell. I was told by the streets, by my own friends, friends. I was never told by my home to go and play PlayStation. I was told by my own streets and my own friends. So let's start normalizing, appreciating women, us as guys, when we are having our street talks. Do you know what happened? One of my lecturers once said that if women would ever say in South Africa, no sex until the HIV and AIDS cure has been found, guess what? It wouldn't even take an hour, because that's the power women hold over us. So we should start holding those engagements that prove the necessity of their power.
Leader.
So now these are the solutions that I would like to bring about before I go into my solutions.
I'll get into your solutions. I'll offer a question later.
Okay, thank you very much. One, government should seek to fund women at a micro basic level so that they are able to enhance their economic abilities and economic skills in society. This is what happens. Government has already done it before in the apartheid government. Apartheid government funded ABSA, funded Transnet, they funded Sanlam.
Thank you very much. Your time is up. And Leader 2, you have the remaining 30 seconds to conclude.
So now this is what happens. If government did it under the apartheid government, it seeks to say that government in this government could be able to do it, fund stocks files for women to be able to manipulate and be able to exist and to be able to survive in the economic world that they are in. Secondly, government should be able to give women for specialized focused skill training, to give them a pilot program so that they may be able to have their own businesses. You take all these women that are having these street walkers and street vendors, give them a skill.
Unfortunately, Leader 2, your time is up. The tables are turned. Leader 6, your 60 seconds start now.
Our government fails black women every single day. Black women are trapped in the poverty cycle as a result of structural oppression. This systematically bars them from achieving upward mobility and self-actualization. At present, efforts by the state have failed millions of black women across the nation, despite economic empowerment being included in government mandate. Further, the private sector has failed black women by propping up a system of white monopoly capital in an increasingly dehumanizing capitalist society. My solution: 3 means for change to allow the most effective economic upliftment for black women. Firstly, state intervention. Secondly, microfinance organizations. And thirdly, NGOs, NPOs, and unions. Right, on to this idea of state intervention. We're looking specifically at the Women's Financial Inclusion Framework document of 2019. This is problematic for several reasons. What I'd like to draw your attention to, panel, is policies that were implemented in Bangladesh and India, including the National Policy of Women's Advancement, the National Microfinance...
Time is up, Leader 6. We have 90 seconds to engage.
The National Microfinance Support Program and the National Credit Fund. The impacts of these policies are incredibly important. Women were given access to safe and accessible trading spaces. Women achieved financial independence and economic empowerment. I'll get you once I've finished impacting, which allowed them to strengthen their role inside the domestic sphere as well as outside the domestic sphere. Partnerships with government led to a formal, extensive microfinance sector. Women reported feeling more self-confident and secure in who they were. And importantly, as a result of their doubled monthly income, they had a higher standard of living and a decrease in domestic violence. Tobani, go for it.
Speaking about Bangladesh and Pakistan, recently we had women there complaining the fact that they are still forced by their husbands to still wear the sashes and close their eyes. So how are we to go
Okay,
and,
Speaker, I'm not going to engage.
From...
I'm not going to engage with you being Islamophobic and being highly reductive about
Sorry, ma'am.
women's agency.
Can you allow me to finish?
No. Right. Then speaking to microfinance organizations, Grameen Bank in Bangladesh also gives us an example of great success. This bank was initially marketed as a bank for the poor to provide access to credit for entrepreneurship, where we see women making up 96% of its membership, right? What they're allowed to do here is take out collateral-free loans and have control of their finances, which leads to direct economic empowerment. And this is particularly important for several reasons, because these women are then competent and able to manage, I'll get you in a second, they're competent and able to manage their family finances. And what we've also seen Grameen doing is running a scholarship initiative for... Sure, quickly before time.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Leader 6, you have the remaining 30 seconds to conclude.
Closing statement, sure. Economic upliftment can only occur through the culmination of a few things. Firstly, political will. Secondly, leadership and partnership across different sectors. Thirdly, the effective use of data to monitor and evaluate progress for efficient, effective, and equitable initiatives, targeted continuous capacity building, long-term commitment, etc. Women will only be empowered if their environments support their ability to freely and fully exercise their rights. When we empower women, we don't just empower them in isolation. The ripple effects...
Thank you very much, leaders. That was our first debate done and dusted. And Ndumiso, let me come to you for your impressions on how that debate went. Not much engagement there.
You're quite correct. That's my observation as well. Not much engagement. I think the delivery, excellent delivery in terms of the content that you were presenting. There was research that was quite done, which came out quite strongly. Job well done on that. But I think what made the debate lack the depth is because of the lack of engagement. I don't understand what Tobani's perspective is with respect to the presentation that you've delivered, nor do I understand yours. I don't know whether you weren't finding each other as to what you were saying, or you went, I don't know what was happening there, but there isn't that depth that I would have anticipated. What I have is, yes, of course, Tobani's propositions, your propositions, that's it. So it makes it quite difficult then to understand what is the substance of the debate.
The verdict?
The winner of this debate is Bell.
All right, thank you very much. Congratulations to you, Leader 6, for taking that first debate. Now, Jobe saying voting lines are officially open and will only be closed on Monday afternoon at 12 midday. Gakoge, do vote for your favorite leader. Ngok SMS igama elithi leader. Inamba yabo kwi SMS line yethu ethi 34708 at a cost of R1.50 per SMS. Nikumbula, your votes do count and will be revealed at the top of next week's episode. We get to our next round of exciting debates. Ninganyakazi. As Finis Namugele, One Day Leader, the show that grooms potential leaders into becoming leaders of tomorrow. Tonight we shine the spotlight on South Africa's forgotten women. It is said that black female workers are victims of both physical and verbal abuse from their employers. You would have seen recently in the papers the story, very sad story, of a black domestic worker in Cape Town who was kept against her will by her employers. It is said they hardly can afford any retirement annuity or insurance against injury in the workplace as well. This is shocking. Why is this still happening in a democratic South Africa? This goes to show, Zanzi, that urgent intervention is indeed required to change the lives of our women. And it starts, of course, with you, Leader 3 and 4. You know the rules. Your 60 seconds start now.
Domestic work is an example of informal employment, often undertaken by marginalized black women who lack formal education, who are unskilled and come from low-income backgrounds. Although such women are crucial for the efficiency of the national economy, they continue to be victims of exploitation, slavery, and abuse. Black women's marginalizations means that their concerns are neglected, and without a power base, they have no bargaining power. In South Africa, wage equality is classified by gender, class, and race, with black women remaining on the economic periphery. We need representations of black women in power, and to ensure that black women are enabled to influence outcomes, policy-making decisions that improve the livelihood of women.
Thank you very much, leaders. You have 90 seconds to engage.
Can I please ask about the representation of power? You talk about representation, but if we're going to have a female judge, for instance, presiding over a rape case, the problem doesn't begin at the judging point. It begins when the woman goes to the police station to report the case. So how do you also alleviate this burden at a micro level where the police that now need to be taught how to deal with such cases?
So political empowerment of black women will increase the influence women hold over matters that affect them directly in their daily lives. Black women in political offices will help ensure that issues affecting women of color are addressed. Black women's political representation can be improved by having institutional resources such as training programs and financial support towards recruiting and supporting black women candidates. In 2004, domestic workers were the second largest employment sector for black women in South Africa, and over the years, domestic work services have increased dramatically, making black women...
Can I interject?
Sure.
When we talk about the empowerment of women, why is it the case that we always stick to things like keeping them as domestic workers or knitters and sewers of clothing? Why can't we advance them beyond that?
We're not saying let's keep them there, but we're also addressing the ones that who are there. For example, as I was saying about the black women who are domestic workers, if we in the domestic workers services have increased dramatically, making black women the group with the highest labor force participation rate, but their earnings remain behind. So if we raise their minimum wages and improve their earnings, this will reduce poverty and gender and racial earnings inequality.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Leader 3, you have the remaining 30 seconds to conclude your debate.
To uproot black women from the bottom of the food chain, their ideas must be integrated into mainstream and utilized for multiple approaches, stressing education, training, support systems, quotas and legislation. Leaders across public and private sectors must strive to be the voices of these women and ensure their perspective are included in the conversation on ending discrimination, inequality, improving opportunity, and increasing economic security for black women and their families.
Thank you very much. The tables are turned. You guys are leaving out a lot of your time, but that's okay. Leader 4, your 60 seconds start now.
South Africa, we cannot continue implementing vocational-based empowerment programs for women who find themselves in marginalized spaces and say that all they can do is to be trained to sew clothing or to knit. We think that this perpetuates further the stereotypes that they are not better to do anything else, and we think we need to deal with this. How do we do that? Firstly, we need to take advantage of the CSR policy that exists, where corporates are obliged to give 1% of their profits to communities within which they operate. This is important because it means that corporates have money that they could use to skill these women. We think that if domestic workers and people who work in the informal sectors as small-time entrepreneurs already are in those spaces, they can be helped and upskilled to be able to market their businesses better, to be able to access resources that enable them to make their businesses more profitable. We don't think that it is good for the black poor woman to keep her as a domestic worker, because the problem that also exists is that the education that comes only focuses on teaching the domestic worker about her rights, but doesn't...
Time is up. Thank you very much. Leaders, you have 90 seconds to engage.
Yeah, the education that exists currently teaches the domestic worker about her rights, but doesn't teach her employer about how to treat her better. And we think that the Department of Social Justice and the Department of Women, Children and People with Disabilities needs to jump in quickly here and tell the employers of domestic workers how to treat them better and hold them accountable in cases of people like Siamtanda, who was a domestic worker who was abused by her employer. We think that more accountability needs to be achieved for these women who find themselves unable to protect themselves. And these departments need them to jump in quickly. Yeah.
So our long history of apartheid has obviously created this vicious cycle that's hard to break. We cannot deny that in some families it's a generational curse. Your mother is a domestic worker, your grandmother was a domestic worker. Now, how do you realistically suggest that we go about reconstructing that?
Interestingly, it is not only South Africa that faces this problem. Poorer countries such as India also have rural women being subject to working very poor jobs, but they have been able to take up initiatives that enable these women to access microfinancing and to take them back to schools. We think that the adult-based education in South Africa needs to be revived. People need to be able to go back to school and rewrite their matric. It doesn't mean just because you're a domestic worker, the only thing you can do is clean and dust tables. We think that we need to allow the Department, as I said, of Social Justice to encourage these women to do much better for themselves, because BEE only works for you if you are in the corporate space, and if you are not, you will be subject to the slaps and the kickers of the bosses of the domestic workers. So we think that there's more that needs to be done in terms of using the corporate social responsibility.
Thank you very much, Leader 4. You have the remaining 30 seconds to conclude your debate.
We have currently in place strategies that are used to empower women, but we think these are not working. We need to improve them. Use better the corporate social responsibility money. Encourage women to go back to school, because usually they are young and capable, and it's only social circumstances that have deterred them from not being educated. Allow departments such as the Department of Social Justice to hold accountable the abusers of women in the informal sector and in places such as domestic work. Therefore, you'll be able to take them out of these terrible circumstances.
Thank you very much, leaders. That was quite a heated debate.
I thought it was an interesting debate. I do think there was I thought you guys didn't quite connect all of the things. So you're quite clear on some of the issues of education, issues of microfinancing, issues of enforcement, but it didn't kind of connect to, I think, a structural conversation. So we have, we often we hear about how great our policies are. They're not perfect, but the ones that exist are great. And so, yes, there are issues of enforcement, but there's a reason why there's a failure of enforcement. You touched on it briefly, Zanele, where you were talking about, what happens when someone goes to a police station, where even though women are quite clear about what their rights are, those who are then tasked with ensuring that their rights are protected and, are carried out, then fail to do so. You need to be able to bring it back to, well, this is how all of these things connect. This is why they matter with one another. Very difficult to judge.
Was it that close?
Yeah, which is generally a problem we have later in the game, but it's good to have it now. But we agree unanimously that Zizipo takes this one.
All right, thank you very much. Zizipo, Leader 3, you take that second debate. Congratulations. All right, Leader 5 and Leader 1, you're next. Leader 1, your 60 seconds start now.
Okay. Panel, being a black woman is a state of social death, has been a state of social death. However, being a black domestic worker and street vendor also means economic suffocation and a general lack of upward mobility. We have generally conceded in this debate that a bulk of the problems exist around a lack of education as well as fear extensively of retrenchment, such so that workers are willing to accept conditions that are terrible because they don't have easy alternatives out. What are therefore my solutions here? Firstly, again, on businesses. I also stand for a solution that places a burden on businesses to educate their employers on how to treat people they employ as domestic workers. What makes my presentation different is that this isn't a once-off instance of CSI projects. This is in fact going to be a part of the workplace culture. How do we make this happen? How this happens is when businesses present.
Time is up, Leader 1. Thank you very much. You have 90 seconds to engage.
So how this happens is that businesses create workshops, businesses create learning tasks for their workers where they constantly have to be knowledgeable about the matters that relate to domestic work. For example, One Life has created a blog post that stipulates all of the rules of the basic conditions of employment that all of their workers need to understand and know relating to the conditions of domestic workers. Why this is important is that it addresses a systematic problem of ignorance. Because if we create an organizational culture of continuously learning how to do better, we therefore defeat the ignorance that makes these problems prevail structurally. Yes.
Over 20 years ago, South Africa's constitutional democracy was reconstructed on the basis of tolerance. And on the inset, we visited a domestic worker who has all the papers that she needs to start a business. But because of administrative and corruption within the government, she can't. How do we help that kind of an individual?
That is also a slightly different issue because that deals specifically with corruption in the government. We think we have a lot of avenues that directly deal with. What this debate requires us to focus on specifically is the individuals themselves and how we deal with the structural issues that affect them based on the nature of their work and not necessarily the failures of the state. Before I proceed, yes.
Yeah, this is a woman who sells street vendors who, according to us, has all the necessary equipment to have a booming business. She has all the paperwork, but when it comes to getting a permit, she can't because they are tossing her left and right. So
I have just addressed this issue right now. But on speaking specifically about domestic
Thank you very much. Time is up. Leader 1, 30 seconds to wrap it up.
Panel, specifically looking at street vendors, we think to keep them in the conditions that they're in is not going to help them. What I also concede to is alleviating them from this, but what we ought to do is keep them in the organizations that take them out. Because if it's the same person who is in that situation that is helping other people in that situation, we say that's how we get better help for these individuals. We can always deal with state corruption. We can't place that big burden on not implementing other strategies that have the capacity.
Time's up. Thank you very much, Leader 1. Leader 5, it's your turn. You've got 60 seconds.
I think the most important thing we should be teaching young girls is leadership. It's something that has been lacking in young girls and women for a very long time. Not because we don't want to, but because of what society has taught us to be. I believe women are the most powerful beings on the planet and should be given every opportunity to lead. This is what we should be teaching these young girls, to take up space. Nothing is as important as taking up space and cementing yourself in society. These are the ways of our current Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunzi. Therefore, in addressing the structural question of uprooting black women, we must also address how we can create a paradigm shift so that we can break the cycle of young black girls like Zanele who grow up to become marginalized adults in the future. That is why my solution is twofold. We use the current legislation through the Commission for Gender Equality to uproot current black women, and then we use culture, sociology to unsocialize the young boys and girls so that out of the expected gender roles so that we can break that cycle. We must remain cognizant of the fact that oppression does not happen when women are old. They don't just wake up one day and find themselves oppressed. It is a process in society.
Time is up. Thank you very much, leaders. You can engage.
Yeah. Okay. So, what from your solution, how would dealing with corruption then also unfold?
No, that was a blunder on your side. But now let me address me on what I'm saying.
Okay.
We have the Commission for Gender, with the Commission for Gender Equality. According to the chairperson of the Commission, Meta Mara Matebula, Most women do not know about this commission. It's one of the Chapter 9 institutions that was aimed at sustaining South Africa's constitutional democracy. And yet the very same people it's supposed to be serving don't know about it. We must make sure that women, black girls, know about this institution. It's very simple. We take the multi-party women caucus in Parliament and we use it to champion publicizing about the work of the commission, so that people who should be best benefiting in this commission can be able to access it. And then we are able to make so that this can be sustainable. We use collaboration efforts between institutions like United Domestic Workers of South Africa and Domestic Workers Service Allied Union of South Africa to address the plight of women, like the minimum wage, which pays domestic workers at 15 rands and others at 20 rands. Yes.
Sir, knowledge does not translate into actual change. So just because people know about these things doesn't mean anything's going to happen. But also on your matter on leadership, Rwanda has the greatest number of women in parliament. That doesn't translate into equality in how policies are implemented.
Let me answer you. I was not talking about knowledge, I was talking about information. Because what blocks people, what separates people from knowing what can advance them is information. So if they know that the actual mechanism...
Time's up, Leader 5. You have 30 seconds to conclude.
But perhaps most importantly is the fact that we must address this issue at grassroots level. These boys and young girls are socialized into believing into these gender expectations and gender roles. If we dismantle that, if we dismantle the notion of the outdated and uninformed expectation of gender roles, we can be able to grow young boys and young girls to a point where gender equality and women empowerment is seen as an agenda for us all, not just for women, so that women can be able to play an equal role in the part that plays equal in social political.
Thank you very much, leaders, and well done. That is how we wrap up our debates tonight. Let me start with you, Dr. T. Your impressions on that final debate.
Yeah, so I think Leader 1, I hear what you're saying, and she's doing desperately to make us understand, the vulnerabilities and the workplace culture and how that can work. But I'm saying again, think about how you are placing your solution in the hands of the very people who are the ones who are not marginalized, who already know about employment contracts and equity because they signed those contracts in their workspaces, right? With Leader 5, I also find that your solutions are very much around, and you say something very interesting, that oppression doesn't happen overnight. But in your solution, you are blaming women to not have leadership skills, and therefore your solution is train women in leadership and young girls. So think about what are the structural causes that keep leaving women behind, because I would want to assume that you actually believe that women are born leaders and they are born with everything they need to lead. There shouldn't be a special school, for leadership for women. And I think for me, the issue of asking about what are the structural issues, right? It's important for both of you because I think you were starting to go into the structural issues, speaking to organizational culture, but I'm not sure that you are clear in how those will translate in economic empowerment, if I'm making sense. And you're speaking about, the commission and information is really, really important. But to match that, beyond just telling people their rights, you need to be able to network them to services. Some may need childcare, right? Because my question then is, if women must be going to leadership courses, who's taking care of the children? Simple. And then, take it from there. But I think both of you didn't have quite a clear, a research sort of to how your solutions will impact empowerment.
All right, let's just quickly find out who took that final debate. Ndumiso?
It was quite contentious, but this one goes to Leader 5. Also.
All right, thank you very much. Leader 5 not able to hide his excitement there. Very big congratulations to you. Masbuye Dola, we find out how our studio audience have voted for their favorite leader. They will get an opportunity to pick out of our leaders who have won their respective debates tonight. Now we get ekhaya ungakhohlwa ukuthi thatha ithuba lokuthi uvotele omthandayo. Our voting lines will close on Monday by noon. SMS igama elithi leader nenamba yabo ku SMS line yethu ethi 34708. SMSs cost R1.50. See you after this. Welcome back to One Day Leader. We're getting closer and closer to the end of tonight's episode. Kodwa ngiyathemba ukuthi isiqephu sanamhlanje has given you great insight into how phenomenal our mothers, grandmothers, aunts, sisters are. In fact, nje black women bayaroka. With all the odds stacked against them, they continue to rise above all of that and raise generations of women that come after them and hope ukuthi ikusasa labo liba ngcono. That is why I encourage you at home to continue to play your part in acknowledging their roles as phenomenal women. Now, judges, we gave our audience an opportunity to cast their vote for their favorites. But before we get into all of that, I want you to please give us your parting words for today's episode. Ndumiso, I'll start with you.
Well, I think congratulations once more. I think on the delivery side, in terms of how we assess you guys, all of you guys demonstrated the oratory capabilities to present your ideas. I think one of the things, it was a mixed bag today, in my view. There was research that was highlighted quite well. Some of you guys seemingly didn't come across as confident as you usually are, which is, I think, you need to look back in terms of that. But again, the coherence and clarity. I know it's quite difficult. You have limited amount of time, a few seconds to be clear and succinct as possible. But I think recall again what we've discussed. If you have a significant amount of time to address a particular idea, there's a particular approach that you use to communicate that idea. If you have a limited amount of time, there's a specific tactic that you use in order to come across. Because remember, as adjudicators, we pick up the things that are most prominent in terms of your debate. If we lose it, we move on. So I think going into the next debates, please keep that in mind.
I kind of come back to the point I made right at the very beginning. If our solutions, if our interventions, our policy, if our development excludes black women, who we know are the demographic majority, then we must ask very serious questions about then, is that development? What does it mean to be the most industrialized country on the continent if we leave a significant the demographic majority behind? And I think they're very difficult questions that South Africa's had to reckon with in the last 20 years. If we are not speaking about poor black women, then what are we speaking about? Which South Africa are we speaking about? Are we speaking about South Africa at all, actually?
Right. One of the most important things I'm taking away today is the issue of accountability and political leadership, right? And what the Commission does is do oversight and monitoring of public sector, and civil society. And so through the mandate that we have that has been given to us as a Chapter 9 institution is to advance, promote, protect gender equality and economic emancipation, economic empowerment of black women remains key.
All right, thank you very much, judges. Please give them a round of applause. Now, before the ad break, our studio audience had an opportunity to vote for their favorite for tonight's episode, and I do have the results with me for 2 weeks in a row now. Congratulations, Leader 5. You're an episode favorite once again. Now let's take a look at the episode scoreboard and see what the numbers say.
Leading the pack by the end of this episode is Vusi with 4 points. Zanele and Gugulethu are still trailing behind with no points to their names.
Nikhumbule lapha ekhaya ukuthi we'll be showing your voting results at the top of next week's episode. Ngakho-ke ningakhathazeki, qhubekani nivote. Voting lines will be closed on Monday afternoon. Ngithanda ukubonga our candidates, our judges, our studio audience, kanti-ke nalapha emakhaya ngokuthi nibe nathi kulesi siqephu sanamhlanje se-One Day Leader. Ngeviki elandelayo we'll be discussing another thought-provoking topic. I'll leave you tonight with a parting statement from Maya Angelou. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Wamandla Zimbogoto zasemzansi. Igama nginguPearl Shongwe, Mtimanzi Bambolo, Imageza Ngelvise Manti Atleti. From myself and the rest of the One Day Leader team, Axabene. Till next time.